Even though most already have their seats pre-assigned, it's common to see people rushing, forming long lines well before the time. Haste is the enemy of comfort, and those who understand this soon realize that it's often more advantageous to be one of the last to board. Avoiding that initial chaos can make all the difference between entering calmly, choosing a place for your carry-on without rushing, and settling in before the aisles fill with people stumbling over each other. Of course, this depends on your travel style, but often it's the tranquility that defines a good on-board experience. Picture yourself in line, waiting impatiently, only to end up waiting even longer inside the plane while others finish getting settled. That sense of urgency is often unnecessary. When you have a calmer view of the process, you can make boarding a smoother experience, like choosing to arrive a bit later at a party where your place is already reserved. The trick is learning to enjoy the time before the flight, perhaps a last coffee or a brief walk around the terminal to unwind. Furthermore, think about the benefits of boarding without haste. You gain more control over how you spend your time before getting on the plane. Instead of standing around, bumping into people who can barely move in line, you can focus on activities that relax you. Ever thought about browsing the airport shops or even reading a good book like The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle? It helps you start the flight more calmly and with a more relaxed mindset. And even with all this tranquility in mind, there's always something else to consider when boarding. Not just your peace of mind, but also your safety. After all, while you manage how and when to board, there are issues concerning what to do with your data and information, which are more exposed than you might think. Few people know this, but that simple boarding pass you carry can be a treasure trove of personal information. Often, after the flight, people discard it in public places without even realizing the danger in this act. The alphanumeric code on the pass is the key to a range of sensitive data, from your flight information to more personal details that, if they fall into the wrong hands, could be used in undesirable ways. So, the first lesson here is to never throw away your boarding pass just anywhere. Keep it in a safe place or destroy it completely after use. The idea that our data is protected just because we don't directly provide our information couldn't be more misleading. A simple piece of paper can be exploited by malicious individuals who know how to decode what most of us don't even bother to look at closely. And the irony, sometimes these same people who are so careful with passwords and credit cards are the ones who neglect the small piece of paper from their boarding pass. A simple oversight, but with potentially devastating consequences. Here's a practical tip that can make all the difference. When disembarking, instead of just crumpling up your boarding pass and tossing it into the nearest trash bin, take it with you. At home, when you have time, you can destroy it properly, as you would with an important document. This not only protects your information, but also helps you maintain control over the data circulating around you. Think of it as a form of digital security outside the online environment, where we often let our guard down. And speaking of safety, attention to detail is never too much. As we come to understand the importance of safeguarding our personal information in small situations like this, we realize that the airport environment is full of peculiarities that may be invisible to most. And one of these peculiarities is precisely the care with natural elements that can also pose a risk to flights. When it comes to flying, few people imagine that one of the biggest threats to airplanes comes from the skies, not from clouds or storms, but from birds. That's right, collisions between planes and birds, known as bird strikes, are more common than you think. In the United States, for example, over 13,000 of these incidents occur annually. The impact may seem insignificant at first glance, but it can seriously compromise an aircraft's safety, especially during critical phases like takeoff and landing. These collisions present a big challenge for airports, which must be creative to prevent such accidents. Some solutions include using sounds that scare birds away, specially trained dogs to chase them off, and even using falcons to patrol the airport surroundings. Who would have thought that flight safety might partly depend on the work of dogs and birds of prey? The interesting thing is that, despite all the cutting-edge technology involved in aviation, we still rely on traditional and natural methods to solve problems like this. Imagine a scenario where a plane encounters a large flock of birds. The risk of damage to the engines and fuselage is considerable, potentially leading to emergency situations like the famous Miracle on Hudson, where a pilot had to make an emergency landing on the river after a bird strike disabled the aircraft's engines. Fortunately, serious accidents are rare, but they serve as a reminder of how unpredictable the natural world can be. And if you thought birds were the biggest challenge planes face in the skies, it's important to remember that other natural phenomena can also threaten a flight. And while bird strikes are alarming, storms and bad weather bring another type of risk that also deserves attention. Airplanes are designed to handle a wide range of weather conditions, but that doesn't mean storms don't pose their own challenges. Hailstorms, for example, can seriously damage an aircraft structure, leaving visible marks on the fuselage and even cracks in the windshield. However, pilots are always prepared for these scenarios and follow strict protocols to avoid storms whenever possible. It's like navigating through rough waters. Pilot skill and experience are crucial for staying on course, but nature always finds ways to test the limits. Lightning is another intimidating factor, but surprisingly, airplanes are designed to withstand these strikes. The metal fuselage acts like a Faraday cage, distributing the electricity across the surface without affecting the interior. Can you imagine flying calmly and suddenly seeing lightning hit the plane? Many people's first reaction would be panic, but in reality, the plane is fully equipped to handle such situations. Of course, it might be emotionally unsettling for passengers, but technically, the plane continues on without any major issues. But it's not just hail and lightning that cause concern. Strong winds and turbulence are other elements that can make a flight uncomfortable. The good news is that modern aircraft are incredibly robust, designed to withstand levels of turbulence far beyond what most passengers might imagine. For those on board, it may feel like the plane is shaking uncontrollably, but in fact, it remains stable, adjusting to wind forces like a ship navigating through rough seas. Knowing this can help ease the nerves of those who are afraid of turbulence. Even with all this in mind, flying in adverse weather conditions can still be unsettling. However, while we're worried about the forces of nature outside, there are other onboard issues that might also surprise us. For instance, have you ever wondered what happens to the waste and trash produced during the flight? The answer might be more surprising than you think. When we think of airplane bathrooms, few people question the final destination of everything discarded there. The truth is that waste is not released into the air, as some might imagine, but is stored in special tanks inside the aircraft, which are only emptied at the end of the trip. However, there's a curious myth about blue ice. Chunks of blue ice, formed by waste that can sometimes leak from the tanks and fall from the sky. Although rare, some reported cases of falling ice add a quirky touch to the already intriguing experience of flying. The technology behind onboard bathrooms is impressive. With vacuum systems that eliminate odors and make the flushing process extremely efficient, these bathrooms ensure a hygienic experience even at high altitudes. It's almost like magic. In a matter of seconds, everything is sucked into the tanks. This allows planes to handle large amounts of waste without compromising the quality of the flight. A curious detail: the system is so well designed that it can work even on long-haul flights without passengers ever noticing what's happening behind the scenes. Yet, the myth of blue ice persists. Imagine being at home, peacefully in your yard, when suddenly a block of blue ice falls from the sky. While the risk is minimal, these urban legends are enough to pique anyone's curiosity about what goes on behind the curtains during a flight. The fact is that, although incidents are exceedingly rare, they are part of the curiosities that make aviation even more fascinating. After all this, who would have thought that even the most everyday things like a bathroom have their own peculiarities in flight? But even after learning about this curious side of airplane bathrooms, there are still many other details that can impact the onboard experience, including something that often goes unnoticed but directly affects our taste: airplane food. Airplane food always seems a bit bland, doesn't it? But there's a reason behind this. The low humidity and cabin pressure during the flight directly affect our taste. At altitude, our perception of flavors changes, especially regarding salt and sugar, making the food seem less flavorful than it really is. It's as if our senses become temporarily dulled. That's why airlines have to adjust their recipes so that meals are spiced up more than they would be on the ground. But there's a trick that can improve the dining experience on board. Studies show that using noise-canceling headphones can actually make airplane food taste better. Reducing ambient noise enhances our perception of flavors. So, if you're lucky enough to have a pair of these headphones, make sure to use them during meals on board. It may seem simple, but it makes a real difference to the experience. And speaking of enhancing the experience, we can't forget the meal options. Choosing special meals, such as vegan or gluten-free, can be a great choice for those looking for something different. In some cases, these meals are prepared with extra care since they meet specific dietary requirements. So, the next time you fly, consider ordering a special meal in advance. Besides varying the menu, you might end up getting your food before the other passengers. With so many curiosities surrounding onboard dining, it's fascinating to think that even the simple act of eating on a plane hides secrets. But of course, when we talk about flights, food is just one of many things carefully planned to ensure everything runs smoothly. And speaking of planning, did you know that even the pilot's meals are carefully thought out? That's because if something goes wrong with one of their meals, the other pilot needs to be fit to take control. Have you ever wondered why the pilots on a flight never eat the same meal? This is no coincidence. There's a strict protocol that ensures the pilot and co-pilot eat different dishes during the flight. The reason behind this is to prevent possible food poisoning. If both consumed the same dish and had a problem with the food, the safety of all passengers would be at risk. Therefore, this simple but effective rule ensures that, in case something goes wrong, there is always someone capable of taking control of the aircraft. This practice, although it may seem like a small detail, reveals how safety is a priority in every aspect of the flight. Imagine a scenario where both pilots were incapacitated due to food poisoning. The idea of an aircraft with no one in command is terrifying, isn't it? But fortunately, aviation has layers upon layers of precautions to prevent situations like this. It's fascinating to see how something as simple as a meal can be part of such a critical chain of decisions. Moreover, this difference in meals doesn't just apply to commercial flights. In smaller airlines and even private flights, the same principle is followed. Some pilots even prefer to bring their own meals to ensure they are eating something they know well. It's a matter of trust in ingredients and preparation, something that becomes even more relevant when you consider the responsibility for hundreds of lives on board. But if you think the curiosities about pilots stop there, you'd be mistaken. While most passengers enjoy their meals and relax during the flight, pilots have a much stricter routine. And speaking of routine, did you know that even flight attendants have their moments of rest, especially on long-haul flights? On long flights, it's easy to forget that while passengers are resting or watching movies, the crew also needs breaks. What many don't know is that flight attendants have hidden areas in the plane designed specifically for them to rest during their breaks. These secret areas are usually located above the passenger cabin or at the rear of the aircraft, far from curious eyes. These compartments, small and compact, are equipped with beds and blankets, providing much-needed rest for those who spend long hours on their feet, taking care of every detail of the flight. Imagine working for several hours straight, attending to passengers, dealing with turbulence, and ensuring everything runs smoothly. Now think about doing all that without a proper break. The creation of these rest areas is essential to ensure the crew remains alert and ready to act in any situation. After all, their well-being directly affects the quality of service offered on board. Without these breaks, efficiency and safety could be compromised. And don't think these rooms are luxurious. In fact, they are quite modest, with space only for the essentials. Still, they are a blessing for the attendants who need to recharge. On some flights, rest shifts are precisely timed to ensure everyone on the team has a chance to rest. It's an impressive logistics that happens while most passengers are sleeping, completely unaware of what's going on behind the scenes. Now, knowing that even the flight attendants have their own secret rest area, it's clear that every detail of a flight is designed to ensure the best experience for everyone on board. But even with all these precautions, one question still puzzles many travelers. What is the safest seat on a plane? The answer to this question might surprise you. Although flying is statistically one of the safest modes of transportation, the question always arises, which is the safest seat on the plane? Studies suggest that seats located at the back of the aircraft, especially middle seats, tend to offer better chances of survival in the event of an accident. This may seem counterintuitive, as many people prefer seats at the front or near the emergency exits, but the logic behind it is simple. In the rare instances when accidents occur, the rear of the aircraft usually suffers less impact than the front, especially during crash landings. Think of it as being in the last car of a train during a collision. The energy of the impact dissipates before it reaches the end, reducing the risk of serious injury. However, seat selection often goes unnoticed by passengers who prioritize comfort or the convenience of exiting the plane quickly. But for those truly concerned about safety, choosing seats at the back may be a wise decision, even though the risk of accidents is minimal. Besides location, other factors influence safety, like paying attention to safety instructions and knowing where the nearest emergency exits are. It's something simple that can make a difference in a critical moment. Many passengers ignore these instructions, thinking they'll never need them. But in emergency situations, being proactive and alert can save lives. Remember, safety isn't just about where you sit, but also how you prepare. After all, even with all this preparation, aviation is full of unforeseen events, and in extreme cases, the crew is always ready to handle delicate situations. But have you ever wondered what happens if a very unusual emergency occurs, like the death of a passenger during flight? Although it seems like a distant scenario, airlines are also prepared to deal with it. It's a situation no one likes to imagine, but what if, during a flight, a passenger dies? This type of emergency, though extremely rare, is something airlines are prepared for. When a death occurs on board, the crew follows a specific protocol. In many cases, the deceased passenger's body is discreetly transferred to first class or to a dedicated area, if available, where it can be accommodated away from other passengers. This ensures respect for the dignity of the deceased while minimizing the emotional impact on the other travelers. The crew's first reaction is to try to maintain calm. The pilot may decide to make an emergency landing, depending on how close the nearest airport is and the assessment of the situation. However, on some long-haul flights or over remote areas, this option may not be immediately available, which requires the crew to handle the situation as discreetly as possible. Although it might seem morbid, these procedures are essential to avoid panic or discomfort among the passengers. For those who have never experienced such a situation, it may seem hard to handle, but the crew is trained precisely to stay calm in moments like these. Flight attendants have clear instructions on how to act, including communicating with the deceased's family if they are on board and coordinating with authorities at the final destination. All of this is done with the utmost discretion to prevent the situation from becoming even more painful for everyone involved. Now, you might be wondering, are these situations really that frequent? The answer is no. Fortunately, cases like these are extremely rare, but aviation, with all its precision, is prepared to handle the unexpected. And while these events make us reflect on the fragility of life, there is something we can always appreciate on every flight: the comfort and security of knowing that everything has been thought out to ensure we arrive at our destination in peace. Now that you know all these secrets and mysteries about flying, the question is, what will you do with this knowledge? Will you choose your seat more carefully the next time you board? Will you protect your personal data with more attention? Or perhaps even look at that airplane meal with a new perspective? The truth is, behind every flight, there is much more than we imagine, and knowing these details can not only make your trip safer, but also more interesting. So, what's stopping you from applying all this and transforming your experience? And what if I told you that the next piece of information we're going to reveal could literally save your life? You won't want to miss that. So, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. That way, you can keep learning more about the world's hidden mysteries that few people know about. Are you ready to take off on a new journey of knowledge? See you in the next video.